Okay, everybody have their notebooks ready? So we're going to dive into the next thing first. I'll go back later and answer some questions, but we got a lot to do. I guess loosely, I'm going to try to keep these to 2 weeks in order to keep everything interesting. So last week, the last 2 weeks, we did the sort of intro / just getting started in Unity / tour of video game history, with Pong, which allowed us to sort of set things up in 2D in Unity. Now we're just going to do a simple 3D setup where we're just building an environment and searching for things in the environment. I just titled the project just exploring for now. It has some of the basic functionality that we need to get rolling. And yeah, setting things up in 3D, right? So we're going to shift. It's really not that much of a shift. In fact, let's not even contextualize it that way. Really, when you were working in 2D, you still had things with X, Y, and Z axes. The basic components of Unity won't change. We already discussed how all the interaction is defined by our colliders and our rigid body. And in this case, we'll just be using the regular rigid body and the regular colliders rather than the ones that say 2D. Right? So they don't say 3D explicitly, they just don't say 2D. And Unity is nice in that if you try to shove a 2D thing in there, now that it's set for 3D, it'll say no. And that makes it easier to handle. The biggest thing here is that almost everybody has some experience in Cinema 4D, is that our basic unit of thing, visual thing, goes from sprite to mesh. So a mesh is composed of polygons, not polygons, polygons. And yeah, those of you who have taken 184 have done some Cinema 4D, and we're going to do some simple things here. What I write down now is that we'll use some of the basic shapes in Unity. Unity does come equipped with some basic shapes to get going. What do you call a basic shape in computer graphics? You remember me mentioning this? Primitive, right? Primitives are just basic shapes. It's the computer graphics word you'll hear people use. You can have a 2D primitive or a 3D primitive, right? A 2D primitive is a circle. A 3D primitive is a sphere. Everybody get that? Right. And so Unity has basic 3D primitives built in, so you can have some basic shapes to get going. But the majority of what you're doing to shape the look and feel of the game environment has to do with creating meshes that populate your world, right, that you're building out in three-dimensional space. And that workflow is, before we were drawing our sprites in any program that output a PNG. So what program did everybody use to draw their sprites for the Pong game? How many of you guys used Illustrator? Okay, almost anybody. No one didn't use Illustrator? Nick, you used Illustrator? I thought you really liked that other tablet program.
I used it a little bit, but I used Illustrator most.
Okay, right.
The other one I used just a little bit, just build up a background, but that was it.
Okay,
Just
right.
Illustrator not good with backgrounds.
Sure. Any 2D, when we're doing 2D as a review here, we just need to be able to output a what kind of file. That's right. And the PNG should have a alpha channel. Sylvia, what's an alpha channel? Nope, RGB has the color thingies. Those are called color channels. A, the alpha channel, holds the transparency information. The PNG can have an alpha channel. Not every PNG does have an alpha channel. Okay? This is different than JPEG, which the format itself does not have an alpha channel. It's also compressed. So that's why we're not making JPEGs of this stuff. Does everybody understand? Okay. Here, like I said, our basic unit of visual thing goes from sprite to mesh. And so in Cinema 4D, we can make meshes, right? Now, when you save a Cinema 4D file, you get a .c4d. This is particular to Cinema 4D. We'll need to save that. But that's not what we'll bring into Unity. Just like in Illustrator, right? You all saved your .ai files so that you could go back and edit them if you wanted to. But you exported the PNG to bring into Unity. The conversion here is that you'll save your .c4d files and you'll export FBX files. That's what comes into Unity as the mesh format. So conceptually, exactly the same. There's like a working format, your .c4d, and then there's a transfer format, your .fbx. Okay, let's get going from there. Let's see if I can open the example. Can I just outline this? Okay. Let that open. Right, so just like last time, I'm giving you guys an entire project as the starting point. Okay, so don't start a new project in Unity. You download the one I give you, you unzip it, and use that as your starting point. In order to get it rolling, you can either do it in Unity Hub, or if you come in and click on the scene file, it should open up Unity. Now that'll take a second, so we'll let it just do its thing. Let's do some Cinema 4D review real quick. Just like Unity, Cinema 4D has primitives. That's the blue. So I might start a color code here for the icons in Cinema 4D. The different colors mean different things. And so blue, these are primitive shapes, sort of the basic building blocks, your nouns. The greens are generators. These do something. They usually make more complicated things based on input of some kind. And the purple are deformers, right? So I definitely make a note of that. Blue equals primitives. Green, generators. And purple, deformers. For those of you, some people have taken 185, so you're going to be A-OK here. For moving around the viewport, we have our Alt keys. So Alt left click is orbit. Let me put something in here so it's easier to see what's going on. Alt left click is orbit around. Alt middle mouse button is move. And Alt right mouse button is zoom in. Right? And you can also use the scroll wheel to zoom in. That allows us to get going. All of our axes are the same as Unity, and so blue is which axis? Exactly, red, X. Sylvia knows these, and what's green?
Y.
Y, right? Everyone else knows them, they just weren't shouting them out right away, right? If not, write that down. The other thing to remember here, which wasn't quite as critical before when we were just doing stuff in Cinema 4D and outputting from Cinema 4D, is that now we're going to be making things that have an orientation and sending them over to Unity. And the way that most 3D programs work is that Z is forward. That's the way things are designed to work, is that if we look at this figure, it clearly has an orientation. This direction is forward for the figure. And if I look at the figure and sort of move the coordinates on this, you can see when I move it, it's facing in the Z direction, right? As opposed to having the face of the figure facing along the X, right? If you're just modeling it in Cinema 4D and rendering it from here, it wouldn't really matter, right? But once you start exchanging things, sending them to other people, the understanding is that this will be the forward direction, the blue Z direction. Now, some things won't have an orientation, right? If you make like a vase or something, right? It doesn't really like face, it should be pointed up, but it doesn't really like face a direction. But for things that have an orientation, Z should be the orientation. Let's see, is this, yep, continue. When I give you that original entire project, it may say, hey, this wasn't made with the same version. You say, OK, just open it, please. And then after you open it the first time, it shouldn't give you that warning anymore. It will have reformatted the project for whatever version it is you're running. Cool. Some more about Cinema. Well, let's leave that there for now. Let's. Anytime. How am I getting this stuff? Anytime we have this tiny little triangle here, this means that this is a button with a menu, and we can click and hold, and there's more stuff to be found. Also, what is the magic shortcut for finding something in Cinema 4D when you can't find it? You don't know where it is. Shift-C. Everyone take a whole page of your notebook and write it in giant capital letters. Shift-C. Right? If that's the only one you remember, you're good. If I'd say I need a cube, I want a square, I don't know where it is. Shift-C, cube, enter. Right? And so you can dynamically search all of the objects that way. Super, super handy. Let's get rid of this figure for now. The shortcuts for the basic translation tools, right? Remember, translation is the fancy computer graphics term for moving stuff, right? When you say something has been translated from one position to another position, that's just what you'll see there in terms of that. And so E is move tool. R is rotate tool. T, scale tool. So it makes it really easy to switch between tools. When I'm using Cinema 4D, my right hand is on the mouse because I'm right-handed. My left hand is on E, R, T. Right? So you can tell really easily which one's which. That's move with the arrows. R is the rotate the gyroscope looking thing, and T, the squares, is scaling everything. Everybody with me there so far? Also, if you're on a laptop, really bring a mouse. These programs are exceedingly difficult to use without on a trackpad, right? You gotta be holding down 2 buttons and then shift clicking or something. It just becomes impossible. At that point, it's just much easier with a mouse. So we got move, rotate, scale. Oh, that's pretty good. Cool. And so the great thing about this is that our 3D navigation keys for Unity and for Cinema are the same, right? It makes it super easy. You don't need to reprogram your brain going back and forth between the different programs. They both work the same as far as moving around and seeing the different parts. Make sense so far? All right, so we got ERT. And one part where this deviates from our 2D workflow conceptually is we have this object here. It's a cube, right? Right now it is in primitive form, meaning this is a basic shape. And if I select the cube, down here I have my attributes menu, and there's different tabs. The 2 tabs we need to concern ourselves with right now are coordinates and object. Really, coordinate is just your translation information: position, rotation, scale for all this stuff and thing. The object tab is where most of the action happens. This allows us to set the size right now and also the number of subdivisions. And so, for instance, I could change the size of this thing. Fillet, what I write down in my notes is fillet is rounding. Right, so there's a couple words that we don't need to obsess over the difference of. Fillet, bevel, chamfer. They all mean slightly different things, but they end up rounding a corner. This is important in 3D in order to make sure that your objects catch light and look not necessarily realistic, but just they don't look too perfect, right? Those of you in the morning, I don't think anyone is in the morning class actually. By default, when 2 edges meet each other in computer graphics, it's a perfect 90-degree edge. So perfect, it's irreplicable in the real world, right? You can't make something with this perfect meeting of 2 planes. In the real world, there's always some stuff there. And that stuff is really important for visual representation. That stuff catches the light. As the light moves across the room, it does a lot for the representation of the object. And so rounding corners becomes important. That's a big part of the considerations here at the beginning. Anyways, those 3 words, definitely write those down. If I press the fill checkbox, now I get some rounded corners. See how this immediately looks better, right? Cheesy, better. Cheesy, better, right? So this, we'll come across this again and again, where as we talk about the history of video games, we have, new video games look better than old ones, right? They certainly look more realistic, right? This is why everyone buys PS5 instead of PS4, or tries to buy PS5, right? If you can get it. encourage you not to use the word better, right? That's more of a value judgment. You could probably say something that's a little more accurate. You could say it has increased fidelity, right? And that things look more accurate to the real world, right? Because they're more powerful than the other ones were. And so we have this situation now where older video games had a certain look, and occasionally people fetishize that as being, nostalgically important. And so you get like low poly looks for 3D things, or the 2D equivalent of this is pixel art, right? Where people are intentionally making it look older, right? Or they're merely referencing an older style, even using newer stuff that's capable of doing something better, right? So this is more of an art discussion, right? This is just sort of the postmodern scavenging of all of history for the purpose of art making, right? You just reach back in time and grab anything and bring it forward and have something to say about it. So, turning this off makes it look more old-fashioned, because there was a period of time where we really couldn't do rounded corners because there wasn't enough computing power, but now we do. Anyways, you press that button, I get some rounded corners. Let's do that for now. Let's look at this. So coming back over here, I've got a cube, 2 more shortcuts, right? You got a page in your notebook that you're just putting shortcuts in right now. Control drag equals copy drag. Shift drag is grid or lock or quantize drag, meaning that it's going to lock to certain increments rather than just sort of be a free-form drag. And you can actually put those together. And so in this instance, if I hover over the blue one here and I start dragging, now I'm just moving it. If I hold down Control, now I'm copying it. But you gotta get the muscle memory right. You gotta let go of the mouse first, then the button, in order to do that. Because if you let go of the button first, then you've essentially stopped copying, and you'll just move it. Does that make sense for everybody? Right? And if I were to do it holding down Control and Shift, now it's locking to 10 centimeter increments or 5 centimeter increments, so that I can place it a little bit more accurately. You can change whatever the increments are, but here we go. Now I have 2 cubes, right? And so we'll call this cube procedural. And we'll call this one polygonal. Right, so the C key is super important in Cinema 4D. Right, we already said Shift-C is your personal assistant. Find me a thing. You just press Shift-C and you type it in. Also, just pressing C is really important. C equals convert from procedural to polygonal. What does this mean? It means it's going to now, if you do this, if you select an object and press C, it'll give you access to the underlying components of the mesh, right? And what are the underlying components? Every mesh in every program is built of polys, edges, and points, right? This whole program is just a big interface for managing polygons, edges, and points. Everything in the program can be boiled down to a big spreadsheet of points in space connected by lines that form planes. Does that make sense for everybody? So watch what happens here. I'm going to take this top one, the one that says polygonal. I'm going to select it and press C. Once I press C, take notice, first of all, that the icon changes, right? So if the icon looks like a shape, that means it's still a procedural object. If I click on it, it still has an object tab. And I can still adjust the size and everything using a formula. In this case, it's the formula for a cube. It's not that complicated. Like you have a width, you have a height, you have a depth. A polygonal object, check this out. It does not have an object tab, right? Because it's no longer being computed by some sort of underlying formula. It's merely existing as an array of points. Once you do that, over here on the left, you'll see that we've got, up until this time, I've been in this mode, object mode. However, we have more modes right here. What do you think this mode is? Point. Write that down. What do you think this mode is? Edge. And what about this one?
Face.
Yeah, face or polygon. If you've used Blender before, they use the word face often. Right? So we got point, edge, polygon. And then this tool right here is another super important tool. That is the axis or anchor point. This is important also, that deviates slightly from 2D. When we brought in our 2D sprites, remember we used the sprite editor and we could tell it where the anchor point was? Can't do that in 3D. In 3D, you need to get your anchor point straight before you export. Because once you bring it into Unity, you can't move the anchor point. That's not, it's not a thing. And so it becomes, before, we could just draw the thing and bring it in and figure it out later. But here, once you start working with meshes, you need to get the anchor point figured out before, before you send anything over. Does that make sense for everybody? OK, so check this out. Now, now that I have polygon, I could go into point mode. And I could still use the same tools, right? Tools are separate from modes, right? So you can move an object. You can move a point. You can move an edge, right? And I'm in the move tool right now. Press E. I'll select a point because I'm in the point mode. And now if I move, I'm moving a point. I'm not moving the object. I can still go back and switch to object mode. And now I'm moving my object, which is deformed because I moved the point. I could go into polygon mode. I could select a polygon or a face. I could move that face. I could R. I could rotate that face. I could hit T. I could scale that face. None of this is available in the procedural object. Okay, the procedural object continues to be calculated by this width, height, and depth that you enter in here. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that you should always do this or you should always do this. I'm saying that part of learning this process is learning when you're going to save yourself time by using objects generated by a formula versus objects where you need to go in and manually manipulate the shape. To be honest, a lot of times you start here and sort of get in the ballpark of what you want, and then you hit C and do this to refine the shape to get exactly what you want. Does that make sense for everybody? It's usually going in this direction. So you're using this to get in the realm, and then this to finalize things. The here, if I go back to object mode, this is the anchor point tool. And so if I turn this on, this is different than After Effects in that this is a toggle. Okay? And so when it's on, I am in anchor point mode. And so now I'm moving. See how the object is not moving? Because I'm in anchor point mode, I am moving the anchor point. and this allows me to place the anchor point. So for instance, if this were something that sat on the ground, I would probably want to put the anchor point down here at the bottom of the object, so that when I zeroed out the position of the object in Unity, it would sit on the floor. Right? For objects, that's a good general rule. Like most of the time here at the beginning, we're building things that are normal 3D, meaning like we're in a room, there's gravity, there's a floor, there's walls, that kind of stuff, right? And so in those cases, under normal conditions, you want the anchor point to be on the bottom face of the object, so that when you zero it out, when you say, hey, go to 0, it snaps to the floor of the environment. There'll be exceptions to this, but under most of these instances, like if you're making a table, you want the anchor point to be at the bottom of the legs, so that when you zero it out, it sits on the floor. And like I said, you need to think about this when you're in your modeling phase in order to get that correct, because you can't adjust it once you get back in Unity. In the interface, when we have a procedural object, see these little yellow handles here? These allow me to adjust the size of the object. If I click and drag those, the one thing that students do here at the beginning is they, hey, I want to move this thing. So they press E for the move tool. That's good. And then they just click and start dragging. This is bad. Why is this bad? How many axes are lit up right now? All 3 of them are lit up, right? Which means I'm moving in 3 dimensions. If I look at the coordinates tab, go ahead and watch these 3 numbers while I move this around. They're all moving. Why is this bad? It's because it's impossibly precise, impossibly imprecise. Meaning it's not like a limitation of the program. The screen is a 2-dimensional thing, right? This is flat. All the perceived depth is just a matter of perspective in 2 dimensions. Right? There is no actual depth. And so trying to place an object in 3 dimensions using a 2-dimensional tool, right? This doesn't have any depth either. I can't do this with the mouse. It just has this way or this way. That's it, right? Is bad. So there's 2 different ways around this. One is that when you go to move, if you hold down Shift before you click and move, it will lock it so that the very first direction you move is it'll lock it to that direction. So I can say, all right, I want to move it back, Shift, click, and that allows me to move it. See how only the blue one is lit up? I'm only moving in 1 dimension. So this allows me to much more precisely locate something in space. I can do the same thing here. So the other main rule here, only move in 1 direction at a time. That'll help keep things simpler. And in fact, if you're positioning things, you don't need to use the move tool. You can always come in here and just simply type in some coordinates. Right? Say I wanted to move this to x equals 100. Y equals 0, z equals 0. There we go. And so that, I just typed those into the coordinate tab. So with this object here, I'm going to hit C to make it polygon. I'm going to go to the anchor point mode and move that down. I'm going to change this to door. Right, because a lot of what we're going to be making for the next 2 weeks here, is we're just going to like build out some components to build a 3D environment, right? So a 3D environment, we're going to be able to walk around and look around the environment. We'll have things that we're searching for. It'll have doors and walls, ceilings, that kind of stuff. And so you're going to need to use C4D to build the pieces. And so, for instance, you're going to build a wall prototype, a door prototype, a ceiling prototype, and then in Unity, put them together to make the building. We're not going to make the whole building in Cinema 4D. This gives us a little bit more flexibility so that we can get pieces. And we're going to use a Lego model, right? We're going to make the pieces in Cinema, and then you'll have a bunch of pieces that you can put together in Unity. So let's cut a hole in this. I'm going to make another cube and make this one. I'm going to use this to cut a hole in the other one. This will allow me to use another object. What is the other object? The Boolean object. Boolean math, named after George Boole. Right? This word comes up in Unity as well. What should you think of when you hear the word Boolean? It's the idea of very, very simple sort of true-false / Venn diagram logic. So when you apply that to 3D shapes, you can do stuff like this. So where is the Boolean object? I forget. What do I do? Shift C, B-O-O-L. There it is, bool, B-O-O-L-E. So this is an object, and this is a green one, right? So it does. If I made an object and you didn't see anything show up over here, right? Because it's not a thing, it's a generator. It does stuff based on input. How do you input stuff? You input stuff by making it a child of the object, right? Almost all of the green objects work in that way. You got to put something underneath them. And the bool here, it takes, I'm going to click and drag, and watch what happens to my mouse here. Right there, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to zoom in on that. Let's see. No, I'm not. You see what's going on with my mouse? Right, if I click and drag over, see how the arrow points down there? That means it'll make it a child. So here we go. The basic Boolean that we're going to use at the beginning is subtraction. And for subtraction, you need two things, right? You can't subtract something from nothing. So I'm going to take both of these and put them underneath. And now, you see what I get. It cut out one shape with the other shape. Every 3D program has some equivalent of doing this type of thing, where we use shapes to define subtractions from other shapes. Now, since it is subtraction, the order matters, right? Just like regular subtraction. 4 minus 2 is not the same as 2 minus 4. Those are not equivalent, and they're not equivalent here. If I switch the order, now I get that. Right? It cut the other shape out of the other shape. And so I want this one here, clearly. But see, I messed up there. See, now I've got 3 levels. That's not going to work. Both of these should be underneath that one. And so I'll grab this one, move it back up. You'll get a feel for that. And now I get my door-looking cutout. The nice thing about Cinema 4D that you'll come to really appreciate is that even once you do this, you put these objects in here, you can still change this. Right? This is the power of proceduralism. What are you doing? You're kind of building your own massive set of instructions by making things children of each other. And you can drill down as long as everything is still procedural, you can drill down and change the parameters. That's the other word you hear, proceduralism. You'll hear, especially if you know tutorials, people use the word procedural. They use the word parametric. Those are pretty much the same thing as far as we're concerned, right? And so now if I take the cube and I go to Object, I can adjust this stuff to adjust the size of the cutout. Handy? Makes sense? Let's get this worked out. I'm going to go to the bool. I want this to be sort of here in the bottom middle. Let's see. I think this will work or not. Nope. Let's do a little bit about this. So this happens inevitably. If you press the scroll wheel, it'll toggle back and forth between this and this. What are we looking at here? What you need to write down is this is the perspective view, right? So objects in the distance are smaller, like real life, like how our eyes work. These three, these are like blueprints. So objects in the distance will not be smaller. It's a perfect vertical slice or straight slice from different views. You know, it says top, front, right there. And you can get other ones if you want. These, you know, think of them as blueprints. That's the word that usually makes sense to people. The word in the documentation and the one you should become familiar with is orthographic. Right? Objects in the distance do not get smaller. The orthographic views are great for precisely locating things because, like I said, you can eliminate this 2D, 3D problem because they are perfect 2D slices of things. It allows us to really precisely locate stuff in a way that is not easy in perspective. For instance, I'm going to, before I export this thing, this door piece, I want to get this anchor point worked out. So I'm going to come up here and make sure I have the bool selected. And I want to be in anchor point mode. And what do I want to do? I want to move the anchor point. So I'm going to make sure I'm in move anchor point mode. Everybody see how these tools and modes work together? And so anchor point mode is on. This is on. I'm going to move it over and up so it lines up with that. There we go. So now it's in this way, it's centered this way and it's centered this way. And then from the top, I can see that it's centered in the middle this way. And so these views are really powerful. When you press the scroll wheel over top of one of the views, it takes that view and makes it the only one. And so if I want to get back to perspective, I can just press it here, press it here. Does that make sense? So it depends which one the mouse is over. Cool. So I've recentered that. That's good. And another shortcut, Alt-0. Center, or zeroes out the position. And so once I got the anchor point where I want it, I go out of anchor point mode, and I can say Alt-0. And now my object snaps back to the middle of the world. Anybody know what the name for the middle of the world is? 0, 0 on the Cartesian plane?
XY, axis,
Origin. Right? In this case, it's x, y, z equals 0. Right? The center, you just call it the center of the world. And so usually when you're modeling, it makes sense that the anchor point for whatever it is you're building is lined up with the origin 4 times. You know, it just depends. But you need to be aware of where it is in comparison to the origin here. How are you guys doing there on the chat? Let me know if you're following along. And now, in order to make this look better when I bring it in, it'd be nice if we had rounded edges. And so the thing that's going to round edges for you fairly easily is a purple one, right? So purple equals a deformer. So a deformer means it's going to take the stuff you have and change it somehow. And the bevel deformer. My notes are to say bevel equals rounded corners. So check this out. Again, I can do it procedurally here. And so I'm going to go ahead and go over here to the purple and look for bevel, or I'll just press Shift-C, bevel. And you see the purple one comes up, right? So when you're making an object, the purple is the deformer. Don't be confused when you're searching the list by orange. An orange thing is a tool, right? It's not a thing. It's a tool, right? And so there's a bevel tool and there's a bevel thing, and we want the thing. There we go. And now, if I want this to work on this, they need to not be a child, but together at the same level of the hierarchy. You would say, well, they are together at the same level of the hierarchy. You were right, but it doesn't, the one caveat is it doesn't work when that level is the very highest level. And you're like, well, what kind of made up rule is that? It sounds like you're just making me miserable. The reason is that as you add objects, you don't want the default to be like, oh, I threw this object in, and now it's going to start doing a whole bunch of stuff to my entire scene, right? And that's why you don't want these things to work at the very top level. You want to be able to bring them in, then figure out what you want to apply them to. And so another good shortcut here to learn with Alt-0 is Alt-G for group. You select the objects you want to group together, press Alt-G. Right? So in this case, in order to get this bevel to work on this bool, I need to select both of them and press Alt-G. Boom! Look at that. I've got some corners here. They don't look exactly rounded, but we can address that. And what happened to all my stuff? It's gone. It's not gone. It's just here underneath this group. Right? And so a null is just, a blank axis. It's like, Cinema 4D has, or After Effects has nulls as well. They're just anchor points you can use to reference, parent things to, or build hierarchies, so on and so forth. And so if I unfold here, you can see that all my stuff is now grouped together underneath this thing, which is why this relationship is now being beveled. So if I select the bevel, right here, these are the two most important ones, offset and subdivision. So if I bevel the offset, watch, this is how much the corner is getting rounded. Right now, there's actually no rounding. It's just kind of cutting the corner because the subdivision is 0. If I turn the subdivision up just a little bit, now I get rounding. I could have more rounding or less rounding. I'm going to make this. Now, there's many other issues to discuss here, and you can only push this so far. Sometimes, let's look here. Another important checkbox in the bool object is the create single object. There we go. That should help the bevel if it's like a reasonable size bevel. There we go. and call this open door. So you just double click on the null and you can change its name. And then I'm going to bring this in. First of all, we want to keep this version so that if we want to change it later, we can, right? And so we're going to save the C4D file. You go to Save Project. In my data folder, I'll say this is the open door, and save it. And that's the C4D file. The one I want to send to Unity, up here, right? There's two file menus, right? You can come over here and say File, Export, or over here and say File. I usually use this one because you can right-click or just click and say Export Selected Object As, which is handy. Because usually you're building a bunch of different things in the same Cinema 4D project, and then you can export, but they're not going to be together. Maybe you want the door to match the wall, so on and so forth. And you can build them together at the same time to make sure everything works. And then later, like a sprite sheet, export them one at a time. And so here, export selected object as, which one of these did I say we were going to use? FBX, right? File, export selected object as FBX. I try to minimize this as much as I possibly can for everybody, but there's still a bunch of this in these programs where you're one checkbox away from success. You just forgot to check, or you checked the one that you shouldn't have checked. This is one of those instances here. So when you export an FBX, no cameras. You don't want a camera to be included in the file that you're sending over to Unity. Okay? It's not the end of the world. It'll be a total pain in the butt. No cameras, no lights. Once you uncheck them on your home computer, I think that'll default to that after the first time, I think. And so here I'm going to say, no, I don't want lights. No, I don't want cameras. The rest of it I can leave. I'll say OK. And then we'll call this open door, put it on the data drive there, FBX. Cool. Let's come back over here. I'll do that again in a second, so just sort of isolate that without all the additional information. So here's our starting point that we have. I'm handing off to you guys to get this thing rolling. So we got the scene view. I'm going to put the game view over here. And by default, we have this is going to be a first-person game, right? So we're not going to see the character. It's as if we're looking through the eyes of the character. And this capsule represents the character, right? The player in the game. So if you hit play, it's the usual computer first-person controls. So the mouse allows me to look around. And then you can use WASD or the arrow keys to move. Right, and I've got some different examples here. The wall is a static thing. So if you run into it, it's a wall. The ball is a movable thing. So that will fall off the edge over there. And the coin is a pickup for right now. And so when you run into that, you acquire it. We'll build the score part of it later. But we have the basic cookie cutters, prefabs for each of the things there. Does that make sense so far? Let's make a new folder here. I'm going to right-click and say Create Folder, and a new folder that we didn't use last time is going to be Meshes. All right, so this is where we're going to bring in our stuff from Cinema 4D. This is where we're going to bring in our, what type of files? FBX files, right? And so again, if you, on your computers, you'll just be able to drag them in. You know, I have that weird thing. I can't do that for some reason on this computer. So I'll say import new asset and go to the where I saved it. And I want the, it should appear on your computer as a little Unity square. And it should say 3D object. And so if I select that one, again, you don't want the one that appears like a little Cinema 4D thing, because that is not what we want. I'll import that. Cool. And down here, you should see, like, OK, we got this thing right here. And if we come back, we should be able to just drag it into the game. Tiny little door. Look at that little door. So the one of the big things to manage here is scale. This is we made it. It looked big in Cinema, but it turns out it's smaller here. Anyways, the big thing about bringing in assets is that the mesh here has its own import scaling. And so you can scale the asset. Because you want your game objects, just like the other game, we talked about this a little bit, to be at 1. Right? So whatever their size is in the game is 1. That way, their relative size is meaningful. If you come across an object that's 2, you're like, oh, this one's twice as big as the other ones. Yeah. And so if you select the mesh, you can come over here and just under Model, Scale Factor, this allows you to adjust the incoming scale of the object. And so this needs to be maybe 4 times bigger, so I'll say 4. And then just like with the sprites, I'll hit Apply. And there we go. Now it's more reasonable. And I've got this, and I can move it to where I want. Let's say over here. And let's look at the open door. If I unfold this. When you bring stuff in from Cinema 4D, it may have a more, the bool shows up here, but it's not functional in Unity, right? All of that fun C4D stuff, the green objects, the blue objects, the purple objects, those are all parameters of Cinema 4D. None of that works in Unity. When we send over the FBX, all we get is the mesh. Everybody with me there? You're just sending over this. It's like you printed it out, right? It's very much like the idea of printing a document. When it's a DOC file, you can go in and type and edit and do all your stuff. And then when you make it a PDF or when you print it out on paper, then it's the thing, right? You can't go in and edit it in the same way. Same thing here. We just have points, edges, and polys at this point, once it's an FBX. And so you kind of need to look at the hierarchy. OK, that's a transform. That's a transform. OK, here it is, because we can see that there's the mesh filter. The mesh filter is the mesh, right? Filter is maybe misleading here. It's like, what mesh file did I load? That's where it goes in there. And then the mesh renderer is the one that actually draws the thing, right? We talked about this before. I can turn this on and off, and it's still there, but it goes, becomes invisible because it's not being rendered. Cool. So far, so good. So now if I turn it on and look around, there it is. There's the door I built. The problem is, by default, it doesn't have any colliders on it or anything, right? And so now we can see it, but it's not functioning as a door or as a wall. It just go right through it. And so what do I need to put on it? I need to put a collider on it.
Which body and a polygon collider, or?
Yeah. So in this case, we're going to use the mesh collider. And if you select that, and the rigid body. And if I do this now, we go
Have to
through the
turn off
floor.
the gravity.
Yeah, we don't want gravity on this. We want this to be a static thing, meaning that it just stays there. Actually, in this case, let's see here. They do switch this up. Let's remove that. Yeah, okay, so we'll make this a little bit different from our other workflow here. Is that static things, static objects, only collider. A little bit different than our 2D workflow in this case. So we don't want to complicate things by putting the rigid body on there. That used to be the best practice, but I'm pretty sure this is the best practice now at this point. Cool. Great. Let me do an expedited version of this. So, 2 blocks. Let's bring one up. Again, I can use these little yellow to sort of size a wall. I'll make another one. And I'll sort of size a door. Right there. How do I cut them out? What object does that? Bool. Shift-C, bool. How do I make the bool work on these things?
Put everything under as a parent, bool as a parent of the cube.
That's right. I can select them both at the same time. I can shift-click and then drag them under there, and that'll do that. Okay, that's backwards, so shift the order. Okay, that's what I want. Good. And now I want to round the corners on this. I'm going to get the bevel object, Shift-C, bevel. And how do I get the bevel to work on the bool? Group.
Alt G. Select everything. Alt G.
Alt G. There we go. And in the bool, almost always check this box, the create single object, so that becomes the default. Call this door, or open door. And then I can export this object as FBX. Cool. All right, that was about an hour. That wasn't too bad. Sort of our basic Cinema 4D intro / refresher, right? Nobody felt like overwhelmed by that. We've all seen this program before at this point. Done some work in it. So, yeah, the project is just listed as exploring on Canvas right now. So bring down the Unity project and open that up, because you know that takes a second to get rolling the first time. And then while that's doing its thing, open up Cinema 4D, and hold on. Actually, let me say one last thing for a couple minutes. At school, when I'm making the tutorials, I am using 24. If you downloaded it new this semester, you downloaded 25. Check Slack. I put up a very, very quick video, like 30 seconds. You can make 25 look like 24 because unfortunately, they redid the interface quite a bit between 24 and 25. But you can press a toggle and then a button in order to make 25 look like 24. So things are arranged more like you'll see on my screen. I can't update the school computers because that's how it is. And so you guys have a slightly newer version here. Right? When I do my tutorials from home, I'm using a newer one, but when I'm doing work here at school, you'll see the interface is slightly different. Okay? But again, it shouldn't be a total hassle because you don't even really need the interface. You can Shift-C your way to anything in Cinema 4D. Cool. Now go do it. You guys at home, try this too. Go ahead and post a picture on Slack once you get your wall with a hole in it. Yeah, Jose, I want you guys to make a wall with a hole in it and bring it into Unity, into the project. In your case, you already know 185, so export your wall with a hole in it, bring it into Substance Painter, texture it, and then bring it into Unity. I'll be back in a second. Everybody good? How's it going? Good. Everybody done? Got a wall with a hole in it. You're downloading the stuff. Did you get Cinema 4D open? Okay. Yeah, but does it tell you? So wait, did you make a new project? Or did you?
No,
Yes, okay. That's fine. Close that now. There you go. That's good. The what thing? Yeah, because you got it at the top of the right. You need to loop it. Select those two and then press Alt G. No, just the top. That whole include. Now press Alt G. There. Now control that. See that two has glued together. So bevel. You probably don't want that bottom of the floor. You know, just have it be open. Yeah, so that just signs you out of the one at home. So when that's doing it, you can. Did you make a wall yet?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah, so the other I was thinking the other day, just with the versions, if you just work with this one rather than 2021, then you should be able to go back and forth without hassle. You know what I mean? And we're not. I don't think it should matter. We'll see, but because I made this template in this version rather than 2021, so that so I think that would work. I sent a pretty passive aggressive email, and I'm still waiting for a response from anybody who has the power to actually do anything. You know, the whole we ran out of these. You know, it seems like this is really helping serve our students. Maybe we should really realign our priorities as an institution in order to be able to serve our students better. Just something to think about, Casey. How do you spell graffiti? Is it two F's or two I's?
Two F's, I believe.
Did everybody here in the room get their Pong successfully posted to itch?
Oh, yes.
Pong, yeah. We're not putting this up yet.
I missed the video ones.
The what?
You know the video one, the question, I missed to close the.
Oh, yeah. Don't worry about it. I'm just doing it as a way to keep everybody honest and like trying to get the questions actually submitted in time versus come time for questions and have nobody actually have them submitted.
We have to renew my max soon, 6 days.
Yeah, it's got to be real close. Like, I think last time I used it I tried to do it like a week out, and it was like, nope.
Yeah, wouldn't let me do it.
Yeah. Now you don't have to wait for someone to respond. It's all automatic. So as soon as you do it.
Can you do without expiring?
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, what if the window will let you is very small. But once you do it, it's immediate. So,
Okay.
So the anchor point tool is the little L on the left side. There you go. So now press E for move. And now you can move that anchor point. There you go. And then make sure you go out of anchor point. Uncheck that. Yeah, you gotta put a hole. Mesh. On the wall. Yeah. So you gotta put, the mesh slider has to go where the mesh is. Press, yeah, that should. Yeah, on the pyramid. But on static things, in 3D, just that should work. Try. Yeah, we just did it. This is the class. Show me your project and save it for you. Or not. Send me the FDX. And remember, part of finishing the Pong project is playing everyone else's Pong game. How long did you play? High score, right? Because I want everybody, for next week, I'm going to have everybody average your scores, figure out where your game is. And so everybody needs everybody else's feedback there, which is why you need, if your game isn't up, get it up. And if you haven't played everybody else's, get on there and play everybody else's game. I had the whole template for feedback in there.
Put the feedback on
Slack. Yeah, let's just do it on Slack.
Oh, on Slack.
Yeah.
Because I was putting on their game,
Oh, like on Itch?
on the comment. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, let's do it on Slack. I think it'll be just, yeah, just that way it's all in one place and without having to go to separate websites and everything.
Can I not have C4D license on my MacBook and this computer?
No, you can switch back and forth.
Oh, I can switch?
Yeah. If you open it up. Yeah, so, yeah, that's your MacBook. Press the X, or releases it from your MacBook. So yes. We'll assign it to this computer, say okay. And then you want to use your MacBook, do the same thing.
Cool.
Nora, it's saying that this is still a C4D file, even though the external says FBX. Just go back to Cinema 4D and export it again, and give it a different name, and try that one. I think there's just something weird with that file. Who's got a door in their game? Is it on your drive or in on the data drive. It's on your drive. If you're going to use your drive, plug it into the back with the blue ports. Those are the 3-point inputs. These are the 1-point inputs. Cool. Just need one more cube. And the bool. There you go. And so, in order to right, so go back to scene 40. No, go back to you are in. Go to window, layouts, default, there. There's a simply has these two.
You said extract it as a FBX.
FBX, yeah. Let me there just a second. Oh, here. So yeah. You're in there. Oh, you're in pivot mode. So center. I think just a minute. have it open at all yet, or no? Where is it here? You did open it once, okay.
Yeah.
On this.
Yes.
Where is it? So the library folder is where it generates a bunch of stuff that it needs. So you need 2 cubes and the Boolean object. Right, because you're using 1 cube to subtract the others. If it doesn't work, yeah, try that first and see if that works again.
I like how it tells you how long it's been busy for.
And it's doing stuff. Once it knows doing stuff. Nora, did you send me the new version?
Yeah.
On email? Yeah, this is working for me. Still not working for you?
Well, like, I got like a thing at the bottom of
An error.
that you're saying, like, some of the 4D objects can be used in here.
Yeah, I got that error too, but then I just went ahead anyway, and all I did was put the mesh collider on, and I'm hitting the mesh collider, but I can go through the hole. Fabio, you good? You got a hole?
Mine is still opening.
Yours is what?
My project is still opening up.
Oh, okay.
Unity. It's taking a while for.
Yeah, the very first time you open it, it's got to generate a bunch of stuff. So, and are you working off of your external?
No,
Okay.
it is on my external.
It's on the internal drive?
No, it's on my
Okay.
external.
Yeah, because it may be faster to work, whatever project we're working on now, put that on the internal drive.
I just put it there because when I go home, I sit on my desktop and then I can just transfer to the other one.
Mm-hmm.
It's taking forever.
So a mouse is going to be good if you have a mouse. And then also, everybody on a laptop, you gotta, even if it's an additional, again, think of it as working out, right? You're putting in, calories out, right? So even in this case where it's an additional 5 pounds, right? Sylvia's putting in that work this semester, right? Maybe you put it on, do a set of squats, before you come to class, get ready. So you gotta have the power adapter. Not only so your computer doesn't run out of power, but also because it will, because all this stuff uses way more juice. But the computers are set to be lazy if they're not plugged in, and so you want to have them plugged in, or else things will just run even slower.
If we even have a looking at you doing that, it's not to your mouse.
Is it the new one you just?
Yeah.
Weird. Yeah, the exact same version.
So you have this
It's connected like that, right?
you actually have to do
You have to continue. Yeah.
just one.
Create the first, delete everything, and then create one, delete one, and then. Create a new cube. Right here. Just include there. Go to press the moving. Where's the move? So.
yeah. So, yeah, you only put the colliders and the blue bodies on. Well, yeah, it's just, I mean, you didn't want to just conflict.
Delete all of them. Select over here.
So yeah, which collider?
Yeah. Just click
It's shape from here. Okay, good. Save. Everybody saving? You getting caught up in 184, Matt? I saw your bouncing balls. It's okay.
So,
Yeah, the bouncing balls are good. 3 bouncing balls? Yeah. You got some.
It was actually much easier than
Oh, no, I did.
stuff.
And then
Cinema 4D was the
we have the yellow dots.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I did it, but
different and it really like everything until there was like a little tiny little switch.
It's so different
Yeah.
on a Mac, so I don't recognize half the
And I was
layout.
clicking it and
I'm
applying it for
not
like
good with
instant
this stuff.
until
I
I
don't know
found
why
it.
I'm in this class.
And it just popped up.
Yeah, if you look on the side, there's an additional tiny video about switch.
Digital
If
media.
you're in 25,
That's
Now we have the dots.
No, I'm gonna do this.
that's what you're
We have the dots.
So look at the slide view, I'm gonna tiny
And then,
video.
no,
And then
go to the opposite.
Also,
Which one? This
you,
one?
if you can have 24
Yeah.
also.
And
If you just go,
straight
if you just Google single click downloads,
get it a little.
you can have them both on the computer, right? So you can download 24. Have a, there's no translation.
Yeah, that's it.
But also,
So now,
this yesterday,
go
and this is making it a whole lot
Yep,
easier.
yep. The good news is, we have like 15 of these. I'm just about to give, what I set up here for everybody.
Just open a
Woo!
little.
Right.
That's it. That's it. And then here.
Okay, well, we're gonna have one to use soon. We're just waiting for our closet to come in. We ordered a closet, but apparently it was so damaged on delivery that they refused to. That happened, what was it? It was before the pandemic. We ordered like a portable air conditioner.
That's it.
And it looked
Okay,
like, it was, like one of those ones that's like, it's like about this tall and this wide. But when it was delivered to our house, it looked like it had literally been drugged behind the truck. But it worked, surprisingly. It was just like the box was like, I mean, literally like, I tied it to the truck and drove it to our house from the airport. It looked awful. We took a bunch of pictures, but we plugged it in.
So now this is what it
That's it. So
There's nothing
now,
there.
select both of them and click and drag on. When you see like a arrow going down, you would release there you go. So what you did you put parent. Just flip this, put this cube here. Top, click out. Click just on this. No, up, a little bit more. Yeah, that's it. Great.
Oh.
So now you go to.
So, go back to
Shift C.
see one here.
See, you can, when you just see, you can find everything that you want to find. If you know the command, you just go there and
check
type
that
it in.
box
So
and then
now,
export
for
it.
you to get the
So that you have one
edges
option.
around it, you click on Bevel, type Bevel.
Where's Anna?
It matters. The Bevel that we're gonna use is the purple one. So now
You don't
select
need that one.
this, click on
Object mode, all the mode,
and
in the
then
new version.
click on Bevel to get like shift
Yeah, okay,
select,
so you're in the right layout.
and then out.
Yeah, they did this
Out
look a little
G.
bit different. That's
So
the only
this is option
This is
G.
So you're in option, you're in the right layout.
So now you have like three edges.
You need to make a
See?
second cube,
So open the
for the
door,
tool.
then all.
and then the tool.
Click on the bevel. So if you wanna have a little more, a
Here.
little bit more definition on the
So then you make a new
edges,
cube,
go to the subdivision,
and then you got to put it under.
and then you can drag or just, as more subdivision that you put, as more definition you have to have a lot of definition at the edge.
So you got to select the object over here. So see how you got 2 cubes?
Right?
Go back to
Of course,
the
and then,
So there's a checkbox in the tool which
the
writes
wall,
down the make single
So,
object.
now you go to
You got to check
file,
that box. You didn't check that box. So you got the reason that's not going to work here is because you got
and
you click on
then
this object.
export.
This has a mesh. If you click on the other object,
Yeah.
this has a mesh.
Export
So you
as
split this up into 2
FBX.
things. We need one to be
Yes.
one. Okay. And so
And then I didn't change.
yeah, put that export again. And then you'll put the mesh collider on the game object,
And
not the asset.
You create the folder that you want to save that, and then you're free to go.
Cool, thank you.
So what do you guys think of the Pong project? Pretty great, right? You're all official game developers now. You've developed a game and published it online.
I should put more energy on that. I didn't have time for it. But is it a way to like trigger in, trigger out, and trigger out some objects?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you could have some of
Some
them
points
turn
that
off.
Get some like a nice barrier to protect you from not hit the wall. Let it trigger out.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, it would require a separate script. I don't think the script I wrote would turn it off, but we could look at it.
I'm just going a little bit far.
Okay, everybody, save where you're at. Let's do a little bit more lecture here so we can get through some stuff. It'll be a little bit more of me talking today and Wednesday, just to get the 3D stuff back under our belt, right? And the biggest thing you could do to help yourself is just open Cinema 4D every day this week, and if nothing else, just make some more walls with doors in them. That'd be great. Just going through the process, getting comfortable in the program. Because, yeah, the idea, you can do a lot, with just the regular tools here for content creation. It doesn't need to be crazy. But let's talk about a few things here with the mesh. Almost everybody's in the right spot. Let's look at a few things with the Cinema 4D. The export, for some of you guys, went a little wrong because this box was not checked. Create single object. You want that box checked. That's on the Boolean object in the object tab, so that when you export it, it smooshes all of this together into one thing. Otherwise, it'll kind of take this part as a separate mesh from this part, which is, we don't want that. We want it to all be one thing. We'll look at some other issues surrounding that later on, but that gives us the basic idea. Okay, let's talk about making things look different a little bit, and about what's going on in the game. So, now that we're in 3D, the lights matter, and right now there's only one light in here, and it's up here at the very top, and it says directional light. Directional light, what I would write down in my notes is sunlight. Right? And so the light coming from the directional light, all of the light rays are running parallel. 2 R's or 2 L's? 2 L's. That's right, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Looks great.
Okay. Sunlight. All of the light is running parallel. And so with a directional light, you do not change position, you change rotation. It's like you're rotating the sun across the sky. So watch. If I select the directional light, I hit R for rotation, or rather E, 1 unit E. I can grab it and rotate it. This default one actually even does this sun setting default, which is kind of, see that? Ooh, right? As we get to dusk, it gets a little oranger, right? So there's like a little bit of scripting in that interaction. And you can see you can adjust where the shadows are. The shadow strength here, sort of how dark the shadows are in the frame. You can also tint the color of the light a little bit more if you wanted to. Let's get away from that for now. And then the intensity, can be dialed up or down, right, to absurd levels. And so that's one kind of light. And so essentially, for this one, I think we're going to try and make it be a basic outdoor space. And then we'll have like one or two structures where we'll have some indoor space. Because the directional light would be the way that you primarily light the outside of a scene. The other way to light would be a point light. And so if I could do something like just make some real Frank Lloyd Wright architecture here. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this and not that. This, Control D, there we go. This over here. Control D, this over here. Grab this one, Control D. Move this over here. Rotate this. You hold down Control. That allows you to lock it, so you can flatten it out and not have it be crooked. And then move this here. Great. Like a pagoda or something. Scale it a little bit. There we go. It's Taliesin West right there. Move my pickup into that thing. There we go. All right, so Lego blocks, right? I have different components here. I can sort of build some stuff out of them pretty easy. Let's make another light. And so I'm going to come up here to light and point light. And the blue color is like it updating the graphics card, doing some updating. And so now the point light is an indoor light, right? And essentially light travels in all directions from this point. It's like a light bulb. And so I can put this here. By default, we have shadows. And it should be real-time shadows, I believe, by default. And this light, you have intensity. We bring this down or up as if it were a light bulb in here. And this sphere around the light bulb, this is how far the light goes. Right? So if you expand this, it'll essentially be reaching further. You can see it filling in more, but if I were to back this off, see how it lights up the inside there as I adjust this? All right, so you would use some point lights and spotlights to light an indoor location versus the directional light, which would be your primary outdoor light for the outside part of the world. Does that make sense? Okay. This is all, I've kind of turned this all into one thing here. I've got a roof and these two things, and so it's this and this and this and this, and maybe the pickup too. And so I believe there's a yeah, awesome. Maybe there's a shortcut for this. I'll have to look it up. And so, for instance, all of this stuff here, like these two walls. Well, this is actually ceiling. This is the structure. This is the light. This is the pickup, right? Now I want to turn this into one component, right? You build a Lego car, and then you make multiple Lego cars to put in your Lego city. And so here, if you select them all, you can say create empty parent. And so that gives me, that essentially groups them together into one game object. And so I could call this house. And I could Control D the house. And now I could put another one over here. And you see how using this technique you could populate a place, pretty quickly. And we've all played video games where people put more or less work into this, right? Where it's just like all of the houses look the same as you're going around versus there being some sort of detail or variation throughout the game. We have all of our meshes here. How do we make things look different? Materials go on a mesh, right? So this is also pretty different from our sprite. Our sprite is pretty WYSIWYG, right? You draw it, and that's what it looks like, and you call it a day. Here, we put a material on a mesh. So if you look, I made a couple materials here, and it's pretty easy to manage these. One way to apply them is just simply to drag them onto the thing. Right? So if I wanted this to be gold, I could just drag the gold on there. There we go. Right? Can paint that gold. I can make a new, but if I want to make a purple one, I need a new material. Right? Because if I change the material, everything that material is applied to changes. So if I change the gold to silver, all the gold stuff is now silver. Right? Everything that was applied to. If I want to make I'll say create new material. I'll call this red. There we go. And now let's look at a few things here. We have our base color, right? So this is essentially just what color it is. So let's dial in some red of some kind. There we go. And I can put this on something to test, maybe here. There we go. We have this metallic. And so if I dial this up, it looks more metallic or less metallic. You see that it's getting darker. It's because metal falls off more than plasticky objects, right? And so on the left, it's more matte, more plastic. On the right, it's more metallic. The smoothness operates separate from that. So you could have a shiny metal, or you could have a dull metal. You could have a shiny plastic or a dull plastic, right? Two separate axes that you can manipulate there. Let's make it kind of a shiny plasticky thing. There we go. How much time do we have here? Okay. So we've got a couple other maps here. What do we call all of, right now all I've done was adjust the color and these two sliders, right? That'll only get you so far. How do we get things looking more interesting? If you actually looked at some of the detail here, if you look at these walls I built, they have some detail in there. Where did that come from? One of the things that you can play around with here at the beginning that's fairly easy to use is a great free resource, Polyhaven. So this is a free to use resource. Let's go over here to textures. They have all sorts of 3D stuff on here. We'll look at some of the other things, but right now we're just interested in textures. We'll style that out.
There's the website that gives you the HDRI.
Yeah, that's a separate section. Yep. Yeah, but these are textures, and so when you're looking at the hierarchy here that you need to memorize is that you have a material. A material is a complicated thing. It has many channels, right? So a channel would be like color or metalness, metallic, right? A visual parameter. And then on a channel, there's usually like a slider. Or imagine if you had a slider for each pixel. You can do that by providing a texture. And so a texture goes on a channel of a material. When you see these balls, these spheres like this is usually how people represent materials, right? Like here, this is a floor material I built. This is a material, and when you download it, most of the time you're going to be the material part of it. You won't get a whole thing. You'll get all of the textures. And then it's up to you to put those textures into a material. Why is it like that? Because there's no consensus about how the material should work. Every program's material is slightly different. They need to be set up. It's a whole thing. So, for instance, I want to make my walls look like this brick. So I'll select that one. And up here, these Ks, what does the K stand for? When you see 4K, 4,000, right? 4,000 pixels. These textures are going to come at different resolutions, right? Right now, we're going to limit ourselves to 2K. That's going to be plenty of Ks for us for right now, in the interest of keeping this manageable. And so if we download anything, let's go ahead and select the 2K option. And you can actually, another thing great about this website is you can download all the textures at the same time in like one zip. And so I select 2K, and I will grab that, and then I will come to my downloads, and I will unzip this file. There we go. Yep. Okay. Cool. And they're actually set up as Blender files by default, but we don't need that. We're just interested in this folder where the textures are. And so I'll double click on that. And I'll get some stuff here. Okay. Some of these are more important than others. Okay. And so we need to make a new material and then assign these textures to that material. We'll do this real quick here as an example. I'm going to make a new material, create material. There we go. I'll call this brick. There we go. And I'll double click on that. I'll put the brick on this thing right here so we can see what we're getting. And then I will import some of the stuff from this folder. So what is the most important thing? The basic color of what you're seeing is going to be the one that says diff for diffuse. Okay? When you see diffuse color, that's just what you would think of as the surface color, like the general appearance. This is going to be the map that makes the most difference here. All right, so you see diffuse color. And so I'm going to bring that one in. And under my brick material here, under base map, this is where the diffuse goes. And so I will drag from here to there. There we go. All right, so you see that already does a lot of work for me, right? Now it looks like brick, like I pretty much put that pattern on there. That's good. Now if we look at it though, it looks like someone printed out a picture, like a wallpaper of brick on here. It doesn't look, because there's no surface detail, right? And you can really tell when the light hits it, right? When I was just sort of far away and looking at it, you're like, yeah, that looks pretty good. But then getting up close, you're like, nah, it's like, oh, I'm on a Hollywood set. This is not a real building, right? And so the surface indent, that is going to be the normal map. I am going to come in here and look at this. And yeah, the one that says nor here, I'm going to import that one. So create, or rather file import, nor, we'll import that one. Now, one thing with the normal map, they look blue like this, okay? Why? It's just how they appear. The one thing you need to do here is, remember how we told Unity that it was a sprite? We need to tell Unity that it is a normal map, okay? And so we need to select this and come up here and say normal. And so I'll say normal and apply. And that, you'll see like more detail should pop up there. See how this looks like the impression of the wall? And so I'll go back to my wall material, and you guessed it, that's going to go right here. And so I can just drag that, not this, this to that little square right there. And that pops in. And so now if I look at it, now that is much better, right? Now I get the actual raised and lowered effect. And as the light moves across it, that's substantially better, right? And so that gives me a lot of what I want right there. You can see I can dial in the smoothness if I want to make it more matte, if I wanted to make it look like wet brick, by dialing up the smoothness there, up and down. If I make it look metallic, that's strange. We probably want it to be on the left side of that. But that gives us a lot of what we want there, just with those two maps. We can then also adjust the tiling, right? So if we wanted a tighter brick pattern here, we could say 2, 2, right? And that tiles it. All of the stuff that you're going to get off of Polyhaven is being curated, so it's seamless. When you tile it, you won't get lines across everything, which is super nice. And so now I have this this pretty nice wall here with this brick material, right? And so in this case, there's a whole thing here, but using those two downloads really got me a lot of what I would want there from this texture. Make sense? Right? So the diffuse is just what you would identify as the color. The normal map is the thing that's going to like push it in and pull it out. It's not changing the actual geometry, like how you can change the geometry here. It's just making it look like it's in or out. To the computer, it's still a flat wall, but the way it renders it makes it look like it's indented. So you can't use this to make like a horn grow out of the wall, right? It's not going to do that kind of thing. It'll just embed different patterns onto the texture of the wall. Sound good? Okay, so we're going to talk more about this on Wednesday to get rolling with this project. If you're not done with the Pong, get the Pong done, get the Pong posted, play everybody else's Pong games, right? Let us know what your skills are like, right? Are you?
I have a question. The project is an empty project, and then you're going to build everything there, or it comes like?
No, I already put a bunch of stuff in this project. Yeah, like.
Yeah, mine is empty, so I just put the wall with the door.
Well, you probably didn't click on the scene. You want to click on the starting point scene.
I don't have the scene.
Did you download the project?
Yeah. Oh, I found it.
Okay, all right. Okay, everybody, if you get caught up with the Pong, if you're caught up with Pong, just get a proper amount of sleep on the next 2 nights. How's that sound?
Not happening.
There's Brennan.
Yeah, I got it.
You got it now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So yeah, if you go into play mode, you should be able to, move around first person style.
See you Wednesday.
See you Wednesday.
I'm exhausted.
That was the concert.
It was awesome.
Great.
Yeah,
I'm sorry I
because
missed it.
The kids